The author said, may Allah have mercy upon him. وَكَلَامُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى لَيْسَ بِحَرْفٍ وَلَا صَوْتٍ. And the speech of Allah Ta'ala is neither of a letter nor a sound. لأن الحرف والصوت يتضمنان جواز التقدم والتأخر. Because letter and sound inherently permit advance and delay. وذلك مستحيل على القديم, which is impossible for the eternal. Subhanah, far from imperfection is he. Because the eternal has no beginning, has no end, has no sequence. وما دل من كتاب الله تعالى على أن متعلقات الكلام لا نهاية لها دليل على أنه ليس بحرف ولا صوت. In the book of Allah is what proves that his speaking is endless. كقوله, like his saying, ولو أن ما في الأرض من شجرة أقلام والبحر يمده من بعده سبعة أبحر والبحر يمده من بعده سبعة أبحر ما نفدت كلمات الله. Had there been in the earth pens the number of trees, and the sea were reinforced with 7 more seas, the words of Allah would not be depleted. It means if all those pens and all that ink was writing created expressions for the speech of Allah, those created things would exhaust, and the speech of Allah would not be depleted. Yani, it wouldn't stop. That in itself proves that his speech is not of a letter or sound. لوجوب التناهي فيما صح وصفه به, because had it been, it would have limits. Because had it been of letter and sound, then it would have had limits. Because what we're saying here is this proves that his speech is endless, everlasting. So if it's everlasting, then it's eternal. So beginningless. But someone might say, it's not a condition for something to be eternal if it's everlasting, if it's endless. It's possible that something that's endless has a beginning. That's true. But it would only have a beginning if it were created, if it were something without a necessary existence. Then it could possibly come to an end mentally. So all of that talk doesn't apply here. It's just that it's possible to elaborate here. It's like this is a conclusion for premises, or it's like this is a premise that could have a conclusion. It's all not completely here. Yani, when it says in the book of Allah is what proves that his speaking is endless. So it might come to someone's mind to say, what about beginningless? So we're saying this, which proves that his speech is endless, proves that his speech is beginningless. So then someone might say, but something could be endless without being beginningless. So then you'd have to explain that case. But that doesn't apply here. وَكَلَامُهُ أَمْرٌ وَنَهْيٌ وَخَبَرٌ وَاسْتِخْبَارٌ. And his speech is a command, a prohibition, a declaration, and a question. وَمَعَ ذَلِكَ هُوَ كَلَامٌ وَاحِدٌ قَدِيمٌ لَا يَتَغَيَّرُ. But one eternal, unchanging speech. وَلَيْسَ هَذَا بِمُسْتَحِيلٍ. That is not impossible. That's not at all impossible. فإذا اتفقنا مع واحد أنه إذا قيل الآن فمعناه قم. Because if we were to agree with someone that saying now means stand, ومع آخر أن معناه لا تقم, and with another that it means do not stand, يكون اللفظ الواحد أمرا ونهيا. then that one pronunciation would be a command and a prohibition. So this meaning is not impossible. To be a command and a prohibition at once is not something impossible. هذا تقريب. But this is merely an example to facilitate understanding. إنما المستحيل أن يكون الكلام الأزلي لفظا. What is impossible is that the eternal speech would be a pronunciation. وكل ما ورد في الكتب من الله تعالى باللغات المختلفة العبرية والعربية والسريانية, and all of what came in the books from Allah Ta'ala in various languages like Hebrew, Arabic, and Assyrian. إنما هي عبارات تدل على معنى كلام الله تعالى الذاتي. All of that, all of those are merely created expressions that refer to what the speech of Allah Ta'ala means. ولو جاء أضعافه فمعاني كلام الله تعالى لا تستغرقها عبارات المعبرين. Had there come from Allah Ta'ala many, many more books, none of them could encompass all the meaning of what Allah says with His eternal speech. كما أن معلومات كما أن معلومات علم الله لا يستغرقها عبارات المعبرين. Just as what is known to Allah cannot be limited by expressions. ومقدورات قدرته لا يمكن ضبطها بالحصر والتحديد. Nor can all that is under His power be exactified. Because we're talking about anything possible. Allah can create anything possible. So there's no way to limit that. And Allah knows everything, and He even knows all the possible outcomes that won't happen. And so we're saying speech is like that. His speech is eternal and everlasting. And He speaks with His speech, and His speech has meaning. And there's no way for the creation to encompass that. كما قال وأن إلى ربك المنتهى. As He said, your Lord's reality is beyond created limitations. That's the meaning of the ayah. فتبين معنى قوله. It has therefore been clarified what it means when He said, قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا. Say, O Muhammad, had the sea been ink for the words of my Lord, the sea would be depleted before the words of my Lord would be depleted, even if we came with another sea for a refill. ومما يدل على كونه متكلما قوله تعالى من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه. And among what confirms that Allah is a speaker is His saying, who is he that shall intercede in the afterlife for the sinful Muslims but by God's permission? That's the meaning of the ayah. فَالْإِذْنُ مِنْ صِفَاتِ الْكَلَامِ. Permission refers back to speech. It has connotation. And that's how you'll see that a number of the names of Allah prove that He has speech, because there's a connotation that basically means a hint, an insinuation. وَوَرَدَ فِي أَسْمَائِهِ الْمُجِيبِ. And among His names that prove His speech is Al-Mujib, the answerer or responder. وَذَلِكَ يَتِمُّ بِالْكَلَامِ في أسماء أخرى. So it says in the Arabic, this would be by speech. So I didn't have to translate that. Amongst other names, and it says among His names, so it's just All of that's compacted in there. وكما أن كلامه عام في متعلقاته, and just as his speech is general in all to which it pertains, كذلك علمه سبحانه عام في جميع المعلومات. Likewise, his knowledge is general concerning everything known. Okay, so just like his speech is general and all to which it pertains, what does that mean right there anyway in the first place? What does speech pertain to? Speech pertains to something told, or something said, or something spoken. Speech pertains to the spoken. Likewise, his knowledge is general concerning everything known. كذلك علمه سبحانه عام في جميع المعلومات. المعلوم, what's known. So you know the word ilm for knowledge, know the word ma'loom for the known. وقدرته عامة في جميع المقدورات. And his qudra, power, is general concerning every maqdur, everything powered, or everything controlled, or every subject, if you like that word. وإرادته عامة في جميع المرادات. And his will is general concerning everything, every murad, everything meant, willed. علمها على ما هي عليه. He knew everything to be as it is. وأراد أن يكون ما علم أن يكون. And he willed whatever he knew would be to be. وأراد ألا يكون ما علم ألا يكون. And he willed whatever he knew would not be to not be. ولا يجري في مملكته ما لا يريد كونه. And nothing occurs in his dominion that he does not will. I asked several shaykhs, is there a difference between saying Allah willed for something not to happen and saying Allah did not will for something to happen? They said there's no difference between those. ما لأن شيئا من صفاته هذه لو اختص ببعض لما صح أن يكون عاما. Because had any of these attributes been particular to only some things, it would not have been valid that they were general. وما كان مختصا به متناهيا في ذاته اقتضى مخصصا. Had any of these attributes been particular to only some things, yani had he only knew some things and he only had control over some things and he only willed some things among all things, it would not have been valid that they were general. Obviously, that means they're particular, they're specified. وما كان مختصا به متناهيا في ذاته اقتضى مخصصا. And whatever is specified and limited in itself requires a specifier to specify it with its specifications. يخصه بما اختص به. يعني, it requires someone to make it the way it is instead of another way. Once it was some way instead of another way, then it needed something else to make it that way instead of another way. وَذَلِكَ عَلَمُ الْحُدُوثِ. That is createdness itself. And it's being created. ومما يدل على عموم التعلق في صفاته من كتاب الله تعالى. Among what proves that generality in the book of Allah Ta'ala is that Allah says, قوله وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. And Allah was about everything knower. وَقَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى فِي الْقُدْرَةِ. And he said, وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Allah is over everything very powerful. وعلمنا عموم الإرادة والكلام في قوله تعالى. And we knew the generality of his will and speech in his saying, إنما قولنا لشيء إذا أردناه أن نقول له كن فيكون. Merely our saying to anything when we willed it is that we say to it, be, and it is. لأنه قال, because Allah said, Allahu khaliqu kulli shay. Allah is the creator of everything. So by merging those proofs, it means that his will is general and his speech, which is his qawl, his saying, is general in all that to which it pertains, not specified, not limited. وَإِذَا تَقَرَّرَ عُمُومُ تَعَلُّقِ صِفَاتِهِ, if the generality of the pertinence of his attributes, the pertinence, the ta'alluq, the pertinence or the relevance of his attributes or the relation of his attributes, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ يَجُوزُ أَنْ يُقَالَ. So if the generality of the pertinence of his attributes is settled, then know that it is said, إِنَّهُ سَمِيعٌ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ, he is hearer of everything. أو بكل مسموع, or of everything heard. You could say it this way or that way. بصير بكل شيء, seer of everything. أو بكل مبصر, or of everything seen. وأن يقال عالم بكل شيء, knower of everything. كما يجوز أن يقال إنه عالم بجميع المعلومات, or of everything known, knower of everything known. So some scholars gave some weight to those and some made them equal, those expressions. Is it better to say he is seer of everything, or to say he is seer of all that's seen? Or to say, yani, and the same question for hearer of everything or hearer of all that's heard. Nor those two. So our author is saying to us, you can say either way, just like you can say he's knower of everything, and you can say he's knower of everything known. What's the difference here? The difference is pointing out the ta'alluq. Yani, when you say hearer of everything heard, then you are, for example, not saying that hearing pertains to something seen. Hearing doesn't pertain to something seen. Hearing is not relevant to what's seen. Speech is not relevant to what's seen, for example. Sight is not relevant to what's said, for example, or does not pertain to. So what's the best way to say it? Hearer of everything, or to be mentioning the ta'alluq more directly, hearer of everything heard? So our author is saying for us, rahimahullah, you can say it either way, just like you can say knower of everything and knower of everything known. ويجوز أن يقال إنه سبحانه وتعالى قادر على جميع المقدورات. And it is correct to say he is powerful over everything controlled. والذي جاء في القرآن من إطلاق القول بأنه على كل شيء قدير. As for the unrestricted statement that came in the Quran, that he is powerful over everything, it is not as absolute as stated. دخله ضرب من التخصيص. So the Arabic saying more closely, some type of specification has entered it. معناه على كل شيء مقدور قدير. It has some qualification. It truly means he is powerful over everything controlled. لأن لفظ الشيء يطلق على الممكن وعلى الواجب ويستحيل أن تتعلق القدرة بالواجب. That is because the word thing or something, shay, applies to the possible creation and the necessary creator. And it is impossible that the necessary creator is controlled. or is subject to power. فلا يقال إنه قدير فلا يقال إنه قادر على كل شيء على الإطلاق. It is therefore not said that he has power over everything called a thing, absolutely without restriction, بلا تخصيص لأن القديم لا شيء, because the eternal is indeed something. فيقال ما قال الله عز وجل عز من قائل فيقال ما قال الله عز من قائل. It is therefore said, as Allah said, and He indeed has إنه على كل شيء قدير, that He indeed has power over everything. You can say that. What تخصيص الدليل العقلي, and what qualifies the statement is the rational evidence, because it's irrational that he has power over himself. And so it's natural then that he's not included in the statement. Just like if someone said, I struck everyone in the house, it's acceptable to exclude the striker himself from striking himself in his statement because he was in the house. So if he said, I struck everyone in the house, doesn't mean he struck himself, although he was in the house. And it's not a false statement. فمن أجل لفظ الشيء قال أهل المعرفة. So because of the word thing, the people of profound comprehension said, إن آية العلم لم يدخلها التخصيص وآية القدرة دخلها تخصيص. They said, the verses of the Quran about the knowledge of Allah do not have any qualification. Allah Himself is included among what He knows. However, the verses about the power do have qualification. Allah Himself is not included under what is subject to power. فَأَمَّا كَوْنُ الْعِلْمِ وَالْقُدْرَةِ لَمْ يَدْخُلْهُمَا التَّخْصِيص. The way to consider that neither of them is restricted, فبمعنى أن يقال في العلم, is to say about the knowledge, is to say that إنه عام في جميع المعلومات. The knowledge is not restricted from anything known. وفي القدرة هي عامة في جميع المقدورات. And the power is not restricted from anything powered. فإذا ثبت في حكم العقل أنه سبحانه كما تقول الأشاعرة قادر على إماتة جميع الخلق وإبطال جميع الموجودات وعلى أن يخلق أضعاف ما خلق كيف شاء ومتى شاء وأين شاء. وتعبير الماتريدية أن الإماتة صفة له في الأزل غير مخلوق إذ هو المميت في الأزل. Therefore, it is settled by the judgment of the intellect that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has the power to make all the creations die and to make every existing event vanish and to create many, many multiples of whatever He created. According to the Ash'ariyah, things being made to die, things being made to die is a trace of His power called imata. Yani this act, this creation, things being made to die means here something created. According to the Ash'ariyah, this is a trace of His power called imata. So then it's not an eternal attribute. According to the Ash'aris, imata is not an eternal attribute. It's a trace of His power. According to the Maturidiyah, imata, death creation, is an eternal attribute of the eternal Mumid, the death creator. So according to the Maturidis, imata is an attribute, an eternal attribute of Allah. وأنه سبحانه وتعالى قادر على بعث الرسل, and he, the exalted, has the power to dispatch messengers. وإنزال الكتب, and to reveal books. وإظهار المعجزات الدالة على صدقهم, and to manifest miracles that prove those prophets truthful. وإنه قادر على الحشر والنشر وثواب أهل الطاعات وعقاب أهل المعاصي, and he has the power to resurrect the dead and to gather those resurrected ones and to reward who obeyed and punish those who disobeyed. وَكُلُّ ذَلِكَ فِي الْكِتَابِ, all of that came in the book. Yani, so many ayat about those things. So we're not going to list those. We're just going to mention that there are verses for that. هذا معنى قولهم إن الشرع لا يأتي إلا بمجوزات العقول. This is the meaning of their saying that the religion only comes with what is approved by the intellect. So here, mujawwaz, I'm going to translate it as approved and not permitted, because we're going to say there's something called intellectually possible or intellectually permitted. This word here is broader than that. Approved by the intellect means or includes being possible or necessary. The religion confirms or doesn't go against what's possible in the mind or necessary in the mind. And anything that's impossible to the mind, the religion deems it impossible. So this is the meaning of their saying that the religion only comes with what is approved by the intellect. وَكَذَا لَيْسَ فِي الْأَحْكَامِ كنواقض الوضوء والحدود والرق والجهاد استحالة في العقل. Therefore, there is nothing in any practical rules like wudu invalidators, capital punishments, slavery, war, or anything else that is impossible to the intellect. Each one of those is selected uh, deliberately. As for wudu invalidators, it's because the people of the hidden meanings said, how does it make sense that if loads of urine and feces come out of me, all I have to do is wash few organs? But if a single drop of semen comes out of me, I have to wash my entire body. So this question is a fallacy because the second one doesn't nullify the first one. It's not based on a mental judgment here. This is a practical rule. And so it could be one way or another way, depending on how the lawmaker sanctions it. It's going to be whatever way the lawmaker sanctions it, since it's a practical rule. So there's nothing impossible to the mind there. And the not capital punishments, also we want to change this. Prescribed punishments. Prescribed punishments. Capital punishment is execution. Prescribed punishments, the ones that the caliph is obligated to execute, to enact for particular crimes. So some people would say, how could you chop off a thief's hand? How could you stone an adulteress or an adulterer? So there's nothing impossible about that. There's nothing against the mind here. In fact, there's wisdom there, because those prescribed punishments, they're called in Arabic hudud. Al-hudud, the limits. Those are put there as deterrents. The kuffar, they want to punish you severely or to any degree, but they don't put enough deterrent to stop you from doing the crime in the first place. And that's in part due to their lack of wisdom, and that's in part due to their corporatizing the legal system. They made it to generate money. And slavery is nothing against the mind in that. Also, that is, that has very sound arguments, slavery, because what's your alternatives? The alternative's going to be execution, mass incarceration, also what? Releasing your enemy back out so he can keep fighting you. Those are your alternatives. I'm summarizing here. War. So some people said Islam is spread by the sword. What calls for war in the first place, though? So in reality, authority comes from God, not from human. So when God is the one who reveals laws, and he is the one who makes things forbidden, and he is the one who raises the stakes for some forbidden matters over others. The worst of which is blasphemy. The worst forbidden matter is blasphemy. And blasphemy then should be eradicated, not approved. Blasphemy is unacceptable. Not incorporated. It shouldn't be incorporated. It should be eradicated. So that's justified war there. As opposed to what? What do they go to war for? Not for the sake of God, the noblest goal, but for the sake of expansion, for the sake of dominion, for the sake of resources, for the sake of democracy. All these is for the sake of. What's theirs? For the sake of what? One might say sovereignty, for the sake of sovereignty. That's when you're defending yourself. We're not talking about here defending yourself. Or anything else. Anything else the religion said, it's correct. Anything the religion said is correct is correct. Anything the religion said is wrong is wrong. If a person lines his mind with that, then he's going to be thinking way better. Some people seems that they're not capable to make their minds run according to rules. And some people are not willing to do so. Religious rules, I mean. But if you give your mind to those religious rules, you learn properly and you recognize that those religious rules is superior clockwork. That's mental protein, those religious rules. Intellectual protein, then you'll see. So therefore, there is nothing therefore there is nothing in any practical rules like the wudu invalidators, prescribed punishment, slavery, war, or anything else that is impossible to the intellect. But let me answer something quick before I move on. So what if somebody says, well, we're going to fight for sovereignty and you are Muslims who are invading? Or that's what you Muslims did before. Some people fought for sovereignty and you Muslims invaded them. So it goes back to the noble cause, though. It's fighting for the sake of God and eradicating blasphemy. The eradication of blasphemy has priority over sovereignty. The issue is if someone has enough heart to say that in discussion. And also, if he does, if he can argue without looking like a fool, that's delicate territory here. All of this is delicate territory. Prescribed punishment, slavery, war. So let a person have knowledge before he goes off the handle there. Because here, who are you going to be arguing with here? You're going to be arguing with non-Muslims who don't believe in Quran and Sunnah. So you have to have proper arguments ready here. It's not going to be easy as saying Allah said, the Prophet said. For people who don't believe in the sacred law, then we have to have intellectual arguments. You have to do that in conformity, not from yourself. لأن حكم العقل ثلاثة. That is because there are three intellectual judgments. وجوب واستحالة وجواز. Necessary, impossible, and possible. So you know those three judgments. I'm going to stick to the script here. So والحسن ما استحسنه الشرع لا العقل ولا الرأي والقبيح ما استقبحه الشرع. As for what is good or bad, or right or wrong, that is by religious judgment, not intellect or opinion. This is a case here. Al-istihsan basically is the issue of morals. Is there something like that? Knowing something morally? Correct saying is there's no evidence for that. That it's binding, that it's valid. Meaning, without religious judgment, just because someone deems something good in his morals doesn't mean that another person's going to deem it good too. So there's not evidence for that. Another person might say to him, that's what you claim to be virtuous, but I disagree with your morals. And that's the argument between non-Muslims. That's basically the point of the current culture war, a disagreement in morals. So then what's right and what's wrong, whatever the religion said. فَإِنَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ قَدْ أُمِرَ بِذَبْحِ وَلَدِهِ فَكَانَ حَسَنًا ثُمَّ نُسِخ. Indeed, Abraham was commanded to slaughter his son, yani to sacrifice his son, and that was good. Then it was abrogated. So that means it wasn't good anymore. كذلك ولد آدم من صلبه كان يتزوج بأخته التي لم تكن له توأمة. Also, a direct son of Adam could marry his sister who was not his twin. فكان حسنا ثم نسخ. That was good. Then it was abrogated. إلى غير ذلك من الأمثال, etc. فالحسن ما استحسنه الشرع والقبيح ما استقبحه الشرع. Therefore, the good or bad is what the religion deems good or bad. So all that is very summarized here. We didn't go into details about the three mental judgments. What are their definitions? What are their examples? Excuse me. You've learned that before. I'm going to move on here. وفي قصة الخضر أدلة عديدة في هذا الباب وباب القدر المعلق. The story of Al-Khadir has numerous proofs about this issue, as well as proofs for pending destiny. Because the story of Al-Khadir, what did he do? He destroyed some people's property, and he took a boy's life. In both cases, Moses didn't know how was he able to do so. And he was able to do so because it was revealed to him to do so. And so it was valid for him to do so. So the good is what the religion says is good, and the bad is what the religion says is bad. And also, the story of Al-Khadir has proofs for pending destiny, because Al-Khadir told Musa, if I didn't damage their ship, it would have been commandeered by a rogue king. So that's why I damaged it, so that it wouldn't get commandeered. But had I not, it would have. So that's pending destiny. And he said, and that boy, had he lived, he would have misguided his parents. So, but he didn't live, so then he didn't misguide his parents. But had he lived, he would have. That's pending destiny. And he said, and that wall, had it fallen, it would have exposed the treasure of the two orphans in the town. So it didn't fall. So their treasure was not exposed. But had it fallen, it would have. That's pending destiny. So those are some of the proofs in the story of Al-Khadir in Aqidah. Wallahu a'lam. Allah knows best.